for inviting me. I wish I could be there because I love Belgium. It's a fun country. Uh, and but hey, this is strange times that we live in, and but we're getting through it, and we're getting through it because IT are the unsung heroes of coronavirus. Y'all who are involved in making sure that people can work safely and securely from their homes during this really difficult time is a heroic effort, and we want to. I think that that's just something we don't talk enough about. So that's how I wanted to start with a big thank you, because if we didn't have the technology we have today and the way to use it, this would be a much more devastating pandemic than it has been. And of course, it has been devastating, but it could have been a lot worse. So, what I'm going to be talking to you about is zero trust is a strategy. This is the most important thing I can leave you with, is that zero trust is a strategic vision for cybersecurity, and you will use technology, but you need to approach it strategically. And if you do that, you're going to see some huge wins in your world. Now, this is where it all started. The first report was called No More Chewy Centers. I wrote this in September of 2010 after 2 years of primary research at Forrester Research, where I went after I got the opportunity to do that and leave the practitioner space. So I was a network engineer, security architect, pen tester, and I got the opportunity to work at a research firm, which was really fascinating and a great experience. So this is where it started, and this is where it is today. In May of this year, the President of the United States, Joseph Biden, issued an executive order on improving the nation's cybersecurity, where he stated that the federal government must adopt security best practices and advance towards a zero trust architecture. So if you would have told me in 2008 or 2010 that one day the President of the United States was going to endorse zero trust as a strategy, I would have told you, get back into your DeLorean, go back, get up to 88 miles an hour, get that flux capacitor charged, and go back to Hill Valley, because it's not going to happen. But it did happen. And that's huge, right? It's huge for the industry. It's huge for me personally. It's hugely gratifying that people want to talk about this. This is my second webinar today. I just did one with India. Now I'm in Belgium. So the transporter from Star Trek actually does work. Now, I talk about authentic zero trust because so many people are spinning it to mean different things. So let's just set the stage for what zero trust really is. First of all, it is a strategy designed to stop data breaches and other successful cybersecurity attacks. So we want to keep cyber attacks from being successful, and we want to stop data breaches. Those are the two things that strategically we're going to do. The second thing is it leverages design principles that have been proven to work for more than a decade. I've been working with my friends at Ontoit for 10 years on designing, delivering, maintaining zero trust environments, and we know from experience that this stuff works. And this company that I'm at now wouldn't exist if it didn't work. If it didn't work, they would have gone out of business, and I would never have had an opportunity to join them. But because they're so far on the cutting edge and doing things that no one has ever done, that's why I wanted to become part of Ontoit. Now, there's a standard 5-step methodology. I'm going to explain that to you on how you implement it, but this is very easy to do. So when people say zero trust is hard, they haven't explored zero trust very much. And then it provides demonstrable positive security outcomes who adopt zero trust. I know of a customer who acquired a company. That company didn't have a zero trust environment. The rest of the company did. It was the part of the company, the new acquisition, that got taken over during a ransomware attack. The other parts didn't, and they saw the same traffic. So we know that this has demonstrable positive security outcomes. So let's look at some misconceptions, things that you've probably heard about zero trust. Put them to bed before we start getting into the meat of this whole thing. First, zero trust means making a system trusted. Well, that's not true. How much trust should there be in zero trust? Zero. I tried to make it very simple. Zero trust, no more trust. Get rid of the idea of trust. We don't need it. Secondly, zero trust is about identity. Wrong. It consumes identity, but all the identity providers said zero trust is about identity. Buy our MFA product, you'll have zero trust. And so many vendors have disingenuously spun zero trust to be defined by the limits of the technology they could provide. No single technology can provide zero trust or get you in a zero trust state because there are no zero trust products. There are products that we use in zero trust that are good and they do important things in zero trust environments, and there are products that are not good and you shouldn't use those. So the bottom line is, though, there are no zero trust products. And then finally, zero trust is complicated. There's only 9 things that you need to know about zero trust. There's 4 design principles and a 5-step model for implementing it. Once you know those things, you can really understand how to do this, and you can make it happen very quickly. And so it's not complicated. The people who say that probably have never done it, right? A lot of people write about it from some sort of ivory tower and look at it and go, oh, that must be complicated, must be expensive, so I'm going to say it is in my blog post, but they've never actually done it. So zero trust is experiential. You have to do it in order to understand it and to have any credibility in this world. So the 2 things that we're going to talk about today is, first, zero trust is strategic and it's implementable. And so if you leave this with those 2 things in mind, it'll be a big win for you today, and you'll be able to move forward. So let's look at the strategic side of zero trust, right? So what I brought to cybersecurity was the idea of strategic engagement. It had never existed in cyber before. And I was lucky enough to have worked with this man. His name was Colonel John Warden. He was the chief architect of the first Gulf War in 1990 and 91. A great military theorist, military strategist, wrote the book Air Campaign. But he was brought in by Texas Instruments, where I was working in the mid-90s, to do what is arguably the first ever digital transformation by applying military strategic ideas to business. And he wrote this book, Winning in Fast Times, during about the time that I was there working with him. So I just hung around him and absorbed everything that I could, and I learned how to apply strategic thinking to business problems. So when we talk about strategic engagement, there are 4 levels of strategic engagement. The first level is called grand strategy. Grand strategy is the ultimate goal that any entity is trying to achieve. And to understand what the grand strategy is in your organization, you must know who the grand strategic actors are. And in a company, that's the president, the CEO, the board of directors. In a nation state, it's the prime minister, it's the president of the country, whoever leads that country. So we need to understand those grand strategic actors because they will define the ultimate goal. Next, we have strategy. Strategy is the big idea used to achieve that ultimate goal. And then we have tactics. Tactics are the things we use, but we're all generally enamored with the things, the stuff. And what Colonel Warden taught me was that almost everyone in the world confuses strategy and tactics. That's certainly true in cybersecurity. And then finally, we have the overlooked area of strategic engagement. Operations, the way we use the things we have in order to execute the big ideas so that we can achieve that ultimate goal. So this has to work as a system in harmony where all 4 of these things work together if we are going to be successful. Now, if I look at grand strategy, the grand strategy of cybersecurity is to stop data breaches. We all know that data fuels the modern economy, but it's this word breach that confuses us sometimes. We think of breach as someone who's gotten into our environment, they're looking around, oh no, they're inside, the world is ending. No, that's the definition of an intrusion. The word breach has been redefined on us by legal and regulatory entities like GDPR, CCPA, and PCI. And a breach in those legal terms means the data that is regulated or sensitive has been exfiltrated from our networks or systems into the hands of a malicious actor. We need to move from worrying about intrusions towards exfiltrations. We're going to stop exfiltrations of sensitive data or resources, source code, whatever it is, from our networks to systems into the hands of a malicious actor. By doing that, we stop data breaches and we meet a grand strategic objective of cybersecurity. Now, this works in the area of ransomware. Ransomware, everybody says, well, no, I don't care about data breaches. I care about ransomware now. Ransomware is really easy to solve, and it has a big exfil component. We're allowing traffic which to be exfiltrated from our networks of systems over to a command and control channel. We kill that command and control. We've just killed ransomware. So if you have ransomware, you've got bad policy in your system. And then zero trust becomes the world's only cybersecurity strategy. If you want to be a strategic thinker in cybersecurity, you must adopt zero trust because there's nothing else. There's no other strategic idea in the world around cybersecurity. And then we have tactics, the tools and techniques we use, and operations, the platform and policies. And we're going to see that these four things must work again in our system if we're going to win the cyber war that we're fighting today. Now, I said grand strategy is to stop data breaches. Well, why do I say that? Well, there's a number of reasons. But if we look at data breaches, what happens with data breaches? So there was a famous data breach called the OPM data breach. This is the Office of Personnel Management. It happened in 2015, where 22 million people had their records stolen. Now, this wasn't 22 million random people. These are 22 million people who had top secret clearances in the U.S. federal government. And out of this information, the bad guys in the world were able to determine who the spies were. If you've ever seen Mission Impossible, remember the first one, Tom Cruise is hanging upside down on this funky trapeze in order to steal the NOC list, the non-operational covers list. Hey, that room didn't exist. He didn't need a trapeze. All he needed was to learn some SQL injection, and he too could have stolen this database from OPM and derived the NOC list. So as a result of this, Congress wrote a report called the OPM Data Breach, How the Government Jeopardized Our National Security for More Than a Generation. The U.S. Congress wrote this report. This was a big deal. This was a watershed moment in the history of cybersecurity, but certainly zero trust, because in this report, the Congress people who authored this said that OMB, Office of Management and Budget, should provide guidance to agencies to promote a zero trust security model. This report was written in 2016. In 2021, we saw the outcome of this. It started here, it ended up there. And oh, by the way, Catherine Archuleta, the head of this OMB, Office of Personnel Management, OPM, I'm sorry, getting my government acronyms confused this morning. OPM, she was fired because a data breach happened. A data breach is the only thing that IT can do to get their CEO or leader fired, right? CEOs don't get fired for phishing attacks or ransomware attacks. They fire people, but they get fired over data breaches. And this is true of Catherine Archuleta. It's true with the CEO of Target, Sony, TalkTalk, Ashley Madison. The list goes on and on. CEOs get fired because of data breaches. So we need to stop data breaches. If we do that, we will stop a whole lot of the other types of cybersecurity attacks that happen from being successful. Now we get into strategy, zero trust. How can I say it's the world's only cybersecurity strategy? Well, let's look at what we've always thought of was strategic but wasn't. So the first thing is expense in depth, right? This is a term coined by my friend Rick Holland, who was at Forrester with me. We've been friends for a long, long time. He's over at Digital Shadows now. And he came out and he said, look, defense in depth is really expense in depth. We spend money we don't have on things we don't need because we don't know what we're going to protect in the first place. And he actually said expense in depth isn't a strategy. So defense in depth, not a strategy, tactic, right? How about compliance, checklists? Man, there are so many compliance mandates out there. I met with one of the congressmen who co-authored that report. His name is Will Hurd. He retired last year. And he asked me, John, what do you think is the biggest struggle we have in cybersecurity. And I said too many compliance mandates that overlap or contradict. This is a really big problem. We're spending more time on paperwork than we are on actually doing the real thing. And we don't need so many of them. We've got enough compliance mandates. And, one of the problems is every country, every jurisdiction, they all think they need to get into the compliance game to make things better, and they're making things worse. So I will admit that compliance and regulation is a result of the failure of corporate governance. We haven't been doing the right thing in the first place, so somebody's going to force our hand. But it's just gotten out of hand. We have too much of this stuff, and we don't need it. So let's reduce the amount of compliance and get compliance mandates to talk to each other. And then we have best of breed. These are things measured in magic quadrants and Forrester waves. I refused to do a wave when I was at Forrester Research. 8.5 years I refused to do a wave. Why? Because that is the wrong way to look at cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is a system that works together as a system, not a collection of disparate parts that don't interact with each other. If you make buying decisions off a Forrester Wave or a Gartner Magic Quadrant, you are failing your organization. This is not the way you should do it. All you're doing is creating more expense and depth. You're not making your organization more secure. And then you have hope. This is what I think most people use as their risk mitigation strategy. This is my joke strategy. So you put your head in the sand, pretend like nothing's wrong. Oh, yeah, everything's fine, right? How many times have you heard this? I have a lot of stories around this. Sometime, next time I'm in Belgium, we'll talk about a couple of them that I don't want to talk about publicly here. And then, you obfuscate reality. Hey, we'll do a forensics investigation after things are over with. We don't want to disrupt everything because availability is really all we care about. We don't care about confidentiality. We don't even know what integrity means. But boy, we want available systems. So we have a lot of highly compromised yet available systems, and no one seems to care, right? We've got our head in the sand. And then you point the finger at somebody else. Oh, it's really the fault of the intern, the person who wouldn't patch. We've seen this in data breach after data breach. Blame somebody who's so far down on the totem pole and don't take any responsibility. But that actually leads to the employment journey. This is where the CEOs get fired. And they should be fired. If there is a data breach in your company, your CEO should get fired. No doubt about it, right? Because they have to take the fall. They're the top of the pyramid. As Harry Truman said, the buck stops here. But remember that you're culpable in that because the only thing that you can do to get a CEO fired is to allow a data breach. And if there is a data breach in your organization, you have policies in place that allows it. You're not just a victim that doesn't participate in it. You have some bad security practice in place that allowed the data breach to happen. So these are all tactics, not strategy. Start thinking strategically. So zero trust, what is it? Well, we're looking at the word trust. What is trust? Well, it's a hard thing to define, but I can tell you it's a human emotion we've injected into digital systems for absolutely no reason. I don't know when we first started talking about trust in digital systems, but I can go back to 1984. In 1984, a man named Ken Thompson, who was the co-creator of Unix, won the Turing Award. And in his Turing Award speech, he was talking about the problem with trusting trust. All the way back in 1984, one of the luminaries of our industry said, this is a problem, but we didn't pay any attention. So it turns out, after 2 years of research, I realized that trust is actually a vulnerability. You don't need trust to move a packet from point A to point B. It is a big vulnerability. And what do you do with vulnerabilities in your organization? Well, I hope you mitigate them, right? That's what you must do to all vulns. You must mitigate them. But trust is a particularly unique one because it is the only vulnerability that is also an exploit at the same time. Attackers don't need to create new attacks, new malware to exploit trust. All they have to do is get on the network. And as a former penetration tester, I will tell you they can always get on the network. It isn't about whether they can get on the network. It's what they can do once they get on the network. And so the only actors who get value from trust in your organization are the malicious actors who are going to exploit it. So this is zero trust in a nutshell. We're trying to eliminate trust. This idea that the untrusted side of the network goes to the evil internet and the trusted side goes to the internal network where all the wonderful people are. But we all know that malware can cross this ephemeral trust boundary, and it can get on this other side, on the right side of this diagram. Now, what's malware? Malware is a collection of packets. What's a packet? A packet is a group of ones and zeros as represented by electrons and photons. So if I can get my little electron, let's see what my electron looks like today. Oh, that's an ugly electron. If I can get my electron on the right side and on this particular piece of Cat6 cabling, you're going to elevate my privileges and give me attributes of trust? That's insane, but we do it every single day. And then we have malicious insiders. So we have two people, they're so famous, I call them the Beyonce and Madonna of cybersecurity. We have Snowden. We have Manning. Trusted users on trusted systems. They had the right patch level, the right antivirus or anti-malware. They had powerful multi-factor systems and robust identity systems. But nobody looked at their packets post-authentication, and that's why they were able to do what they were trying to do. What did they exploit? What was their tool? It was the trust model. They exploited the trust model, just like all data breaches ultimately exploit the trust model. And so this is how we know that MFA is used within zero trust, but not equivalent to zero trust. So we need to get rid of trust. No more trusted users, packets, systems, devices. I will often be accused of saying people are not trustworthy. And I am not saying that, however. I am saying something much more profound. I am saying people are not packets. It is the anthropomorphization of the network that is killing us. The idea that John is on the network, Yuri is on the network. We're not on the network right now. We are absolutely not. I have not shrunken down into a subatomic particle and been sent over the public internet to the Teams server. That has never happened to anyone ever in history, right? No one has ever been on a network. It happens in movies occasionally, maybe Tron and Lawnmower Man, but even in the Matrix, they have to plug in. So I'm not saying anything about human beings. I'm saying things about packets. And our whole business is zeros and ones as represented by electrons or photons. Very simple business that we're in. So now we get into the other key thing, that zero trust is implementable. So it's strategically resonant to the highest levels of your organization. If I get 10 minutes with your CEO, I can explain zero trust with them. It is oftentimes easier for them to understand it than it is for somebody who's a technologist. But this is tactically implementable using existing technology at whatever state that technology is in. The strategy never changes. It's decoupled from the tactics. And so the tactics will change and get better and better over time. So this isn't about products. This is about strategy. And we will use products to do that. So this is where we get into the tactics, the tools and techniques. So zero trust is very simple. Remember, I said there's only 9 things you need to know. So let's start with the first 4, the design concepts. The first thing we're going to do is focus on the business outcomes. This is how we align to the grand strategic objectives of our organization. What is the business trying to achieve? If we don't know the answer to this, we will always fail anyway. And the reason cybersecurity has failed is we don't meet the business objectives of our organization. The second thing we're going to do is design from the inside out instead of the outside in. We all learn to design networks and systems from the edge inward, whether that's the internet edge or the service provider edge or the endpoint edge, right? But we never actually got into designing what needed to be protected. And so when I ask people what needs to be protected, oh man, haven't thought about that. I just want to know where to put this product because we're so tactically focused. And then from there, we need to determine who or what needs to have access, need to know, least privilege. This is where we want to ensure that only the right user gets access to the right resource at a high level. And then we must inspect and log all that traffic all the way up at layer 7 so that we can, make it much harder for the attackers to to have a successful cyber attack. And if we can do that, we can create a layer 7 policy. Zero trust is ultimately a layer 7 policy statement. I just need layer 7 controls to enforce that policy in real time. So the best visual metaphor I can give you on what we're doing with zero trust is to show you how the U.S. Secret Service protects the President of the United States. This is President Barack Obama's 2009 inauguration parade. And in this image, we can see that there are three things that the U.S. Secret Service knows about the President of the United States that we do not know about the data or assets we are protecting. First, they know who the president is. They don't do presidential discovery projects, do they? They don't scan for the president. Second, they know where the president is at all times. They never go, hey, Yuri, you seen the president lately? Yuri goes, nah, maybe Joe knows. No, that doesn't happen in real life. And then third, they know who should have access to the president at any given time. These are the three fundamental questions you must ask if you're protecting anything, whether it's the president, whether it is data, or whether it is an asset. So we can see here that, yes, there was a perimeter on this state, but let's look at this uniformed Secret Service agent over here on the right side. He has his hands in his pockets. He has a warm woolly hat on. His coat is zipped up. Why? Because it's cold outside. It's January 20th of 2009. January in Washington, D.C. is cold, cold, cold. And so he doesn't want to be cold, and he knows he's not really doing any real protection. He's just security theater. He's there to intimidate, maybe knock down some low-hanging fruit. But the real protection is being done at the bottom of the screen, down at what I call the protect surface. The protect surface is the fundamental tactical concept in zero trust. What do I need to protect? So I can take the overall attack surface, shrink it down orders of magnitude to something that is easily known and easily controlled, and that's called a protect surface. So there are four people in the protect surface on this date: the president, his wife, and his two children. If at the end of the day those four people are left alive, the Secret Service has done their job. If this person, something happens to them, well, that's a bummer, but they aren't part of the protect surface. So the job of the Secret Service is not to protect them. Now, by the way, the vehicle itself, called the Beast, is not the protect surface. It's merely transport. Sometimes the president is in the airplane. It's called Air Force One. Sometimes he's in the helicopter. That's called Marine One. Sometimes he's walking amongst the crowd at a rope line. There's always a rope in between the president and the crowd and their Secret Service agents surrounding him. But the president, and in this case the president's family, because they're with him, are the protect surface. Now, the next thing we can see is something really amazing. Let's watch what the Secret Service does here. That we need to keep a close eye on this, because this will blow your mind. Look at these Secret Service agents. They are adjacent to the protect surface. That is amazing. We don't do that in cybersecurity. Our controls are typically on the perimeter or on the endpoint, which are as far away as we can possibly get them from the thing we're trying to protect. And this creates a secondary attack surface that we happen to call the internal network. So this is where we get the word dwell time. You know that word, dwell time. How long are they in the system before anybody notices? I was just, which data breach? It's hard to even keep track of them. But there was one, then they were talking about how long they'd been in there. And it's like, yeah, these attackers are typically inside these systems for days, weeks, months, sometimes even years before they're discovered, and they're typically discovered by a third party, not the breached party. We should not have this term dwell time. It is something that should not exist, and exists because of a failure of architectural vision and a failure of where we put our controls. We put our controls in the wrong place, and we give the attackers the ability to have this dwell time. So now let's see what happens. Because the Secret Service has their controls adjacent to the protect surface, they are now going to define a micro perimeter in policy. And because the policy is tied to the micro perimeter, the microperimeter is small, the policy is small. So at the moment this image was taken, there are only two individuals who can transit outbound of the microperimeter, these two Secret Service agents in the front of the beast. Remember, these four people are the protect surface, so they can never leave the protect surface because they are the protect surface. And there are exactly 0 people who can come inbound of the microperimeter at this point. Let's look at this Secret Service agent here. He doesn't have gloves on. He doesn't have a hat on. His coat isn't buttoned. Why? Because he has a control underneath his jacket where he is going to enforce Layer 7 policy. So if my friend Yuri happened to be there that day and he had run up to this vehicle because he wanted to get a good look at his favorite president, Barack Obama, that would be known in the Bobbert family as Yuri's very, very, very bad day. Because he would have either been severely injured or dead as a result of that, because he was violating policy, and there is a control in place to enforce that policy at this moment. Now, the Secret Service doesn't stop there. So they continuously monitor and update in real time. So they're looking out here. They see this guy in white. He looks a little bit sketchy. So let's keep an eye on him. So they'll send a message out through their command and control that they have inside this vehicle. There's a special agent in charge here who's going to send some message. Keep an eye out on the guy in white. He seems to be following us. He's moving this way, so we got to keep an eye on him. Is he doing something sketch? But they could also send a message here and say, let's allow somebody to come in. There's an important person who needs to get access to the president, so let's change the policy and allow them to come in. And then when they leave, we'll change the policy back to nobody gets in. And so this is a zero trust model of executive protection. This is how you protect anything, whether it is the president of the United States, whether it is data or assets, and it is the best visual metaphor I can give you on what I'm trying to accomplish when I work architecting zero trust environments. So where do you start? Well, you start your zero trust journey with the first step. This is the Fliori Stairs in Lysenfjord in Norway. It's near where my grandfather was born. So at the end of 2019, I was there visiting family, doing a little bit of work on the side there. And so I went to visit this place called the Fliori Stairs. This is the world's longest wooden staircase. There are 4,444 steps here. And people come from all over the world to climb these steps. It's on their bucket list, they say. And so I was climbing these, and I got up to about here, and I said, this is hard. I'm not going to go up here because this is not on my bucket list. I'm afraid I might actually kick the bucket if I climb these 4,444 steps. But it made me think about the people that these steps were built for. So at the turn of the 20th century, in the early 1900s, they used these steps to carve out the mountain that you see over here. There's a mountain here that was hollowed out so they could put a hydroelectric power plant. And there were people whose jobs were every day to carry things like 50-kilogram bags of concrete up to the top of this mountain before this little rail system was built. And I was thinking about that poor dude who has to carry a 50-kilogram bucket bag of concrete up that mountain. And I thought, does he think about the 4,000th step when he's starting that journey? The answer is no. He thinks about the first step and the second step and the third step and the fourth step and the fifth step. And eventually he gets to the 4,444 step and hands somebody that bag of concrete, and then he goes down and he does it again and he does it again and he does it again. That's an amazing thing to do. You want to talk about a hard job? That's a hard job. And so zero trust, you should think of it in the same way. You start your journey with the first step. One step at a time, people. Don't think about the 4,000th step. Think about the first step and then the second step. And so the five-step methodology that I created defines the way you do this and guides your journey. So the first thing we're going to do is define the protect surface. What do we need to protect? That's the fundamental question of zero trust. If you do not understand this and know the answer to this, you will never be able to be successful building a zero trust environment. So what do you protect? Well, that's known as a DAS element. This is an acronym I created to help you easily understand what goes into a zero trust environment. So DAS is an acronym that stands for data that you need to protect, any sensitive data. There might be applications that use that sensitive data, so we'll protect the entire application. There are assets we need to protect, and then there are services we need to protect, like DNS, DHCP, Active Directory, Network Time Protocol. So we take a single DAS element and put it inside of a single protect surface, and we build each protect surface or each zero trust environment out one protect surface at a time. So once we figured out what DAS element we're going to put inside of this particular protect surface, we then go to the second step, which is map the transaction flows. Right? How does the system work together as a system? This is extremely important. I've seen things go really, really badly because no one knew how the system worked. And they say, oh, there's this old computer. Let's pull it out of the system. Oh, no, that was integral to the whole thing, and we've just taken down the entire network. So understand how it works and do this by mapping, at least at a high level, the transaction flows of the system. And this will lead you to the third step. This is architecting the zero trust environment. A lot of people want to start here because that's how we learned to do it in the 20th century way, where we built these, we used reference architectures and we just changed the IP addresses and we said, here you go, business leader, we've got a network for you. And they said, gee, that's wonderful. Thanks so much. But you've given me a bunch of round holes and I have square pegs. How do I make it fit? And you say, here's a knife, whittle away. You have to make it fit what we've already built you. And this is why the business thinks of IT as an inhibitor to the business, because we weren't paying any attention to their problems. We were just building things the way some vendor told us to do it. That's not the way you do it. Architect it after you understand what you're protecting and how that thing works, and that will tell you how to architect the environment. And then step 4 is to create the policy. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But remember, I've already said zero trust is essentially a policy statement. And then finally, we monitor and maintain. This is where we take all the learnings, all of the telemetry, we bring it into the system, and we create a feedback loop so that we can make this stronger and stronger, each of these 5 steps over time. This is the concept of anti-fragility. So let me just spell that here as I talk, Fragility. So if you haven't read the book Anti-Fragile by Taleb, you should. He gave me the vocabulary to talk about what I'd been trying to do. So the idea here is that we aren't just limited to fragile and robust. There's a way of thinking about systems in between there called anti-fragile. And he uses the human body as one of his examples. So when you work out, you actually get stronger because you're putting your system, your body, under load, tremendous load. So the more it's under load, the stronger you're going to get. This is true in cybersecurity as well. The more telemetry we see, the more we can automate this and the more anti-fragile we can make the system. And that's what I'm trying to do here at Onto-It on a daily basis. Now, zero trust defines network segmentation. A lot of people tell me, oh, I'm going to do zero trust because I have to segment my network. And I'll say, hey, why are you segmenting your network? And they'll say, well, we have an audit finding that told us to segment the network. And I'll say, well, that might be the compelling event that's going to force you to segment the network, but that's not why you're segmenting it. The only reason to segment a network is to protect something. And this is why you must start with the protect surface. So this is a cardholder data environment for credit card information. So the DAS element we call PCI. That's shorthand for credit card data. So this tells us why we are segmenting. A lot of people don't know why. I was in 2019, I was in London with the CIO of one of the world's largest companies, and he said at this moment when I was showing this slide, oh, I see why our segmentation project failed. We spent 3 years and $2 million, and it completely failed because we didn't even know why we were doing it. We were just doing it. We were just doing it randomly. So you must understand why you're doing it. And then the second thing you will do is you will take and connect a segmentation gateway to the protect surface to define a microperimeter in policy that shows how you're enforcing this all the way up at layer 7. A segmentation gateway is a gateway that segments networks layers 2 through 7 based upon um, users, applications, or data. Typically, we currently use next generation firewalls to function as segmentation gateways in zero trust environments. These can be physical segmentation gateways or virtual segmentation gateways. It does not have to be a next generation firewall, but currently these are state of the art in terms of layer 7 controls. So once we add centralized management to the system, we now have the reference architecture for zero trust. So once we do that, we're just going to build this out one protect surface at a time so we can do this incrementally, iteratively, and non-disruptively. Now, this works in any environment. It works in both public and private clouds or on-premise. So the first zero trust environments were on-premise, where we replaced stateful packet filtering firewalls with physical segmentation gateways, and now we can do on-premise zero trust. And then we had the rise of clouds, private clouds and public clouds. And I will tell you that these two things are exactly the same, right? They're both just hypervisor stacks. The difference is who owns the hypervisor stack. That's it. That's the only difference between a public and a private cloud. And there are reasons that you will probably have both in your environment. We are so in love with the public cloud that we don't understand that it's just a hypervisor stack. That's all. And we need to secure both of these in the exact same way. So what we're going to do to bring them into a zero trusted environment is take advantage of the virtual network infrastructure. This is the layer 2 and 3 inherent in every vSwitch of a hypervisor. And what we're going to do is do a transparent service insertion of a virtual segmentation gateway so we can add layer 7 segmentation gateway capability to every vSwitch port. This is important because we can, by doing this, this is where policy gets enforced. So as traffic moves up towards the workload, where of course the protect surface is located, we're going to enforce policy. And so there are multiple vendors of this. I came from Palo Alto Networks, so this is pretty Palo-centric. But now we can now protect that workload, and you can do this inside of the container. There's segmentation gateways that can be built into containers. And all of these things can have centralized management where the policy is based upon the users, the application, the data, the traffic, and not the location of the device. Location is immaterial to the modern cybersecurity world. Of course, we can have these things on endpoints, and we can do this in any of the private clouds or the public clouds that exist. And we do it the same way. We do a transparent service insertion of a virtual segmentation gateway, in this case a VM series from Palo Alto Networks, and this controls traffic as it moves up towards the hypervisor where the protect surface is located on a workload. And so automatically we instantiate this policy in real time as the workload spins up. Of course, the difference between a public and private cloud is in a private cloud, you can have visibility in the telemetry on the back end, and you can't in public cloud. So that's why you need either API or agent-based solutions to get a viewpoint for the telemetry of the public cloud so you can send this into a centralized management system. Now, we get into the operations. This is the fourth level, often hugely overlooked. I don't know why we overlook it, but we do. And so I use an image from a movie called The Imitation Game to explain what I'm trying to accomplish. So if you've seen the movie The Imitation Game, you know that it's about breaking the Nazi Enigma codes by Alan Turing and a team at Bletchley Park. And he built this analog computer called the Bomba. And in that movie, there's a moment where the character of Alan Turing, played by Benedict Cumberbatch, what a great name for a movie star, isn't it? Benedict Cumberbatch. Where Benedict Cumberbatch says something really profound. I mean, it just knocked me back in my seat when I first heard it. He said, "What if only a machine can defeat another machine?" That is so true. our our adversary is a machine. They are much more automated than we are, much more agile than we are. You realize hackers don't have change control? They don't. Hey, I just tried to hack this company in Belgium. It didn't work. When's my next hacking window? Oh, it's Sunday at 3 a.m. But that's my daughter's birthday. No, that's the hacking window. You got to do it in the hacking window. Because we have all these manual processes like change control, we're always behind. So we have to solve this with automation. And that's what I'm doing here at Onto It. We are building the machine to defeat the machine. And that's why I'm so excited. So if you want to see what we're doing, send an email to zerotrust at ontoit.net, and we will arrange a demo. And I will, if you ask for me to do the demo for you, I will even do it for you. So we'll get on a call and we'll look at the machine that is going to defeat the machine. And the way you interface with that machine is via policy. So I created a new way to create policy for this technology, and it's called the Kipling method. This is my personal homage to the writer Rudyard Kipling, who gave us the idea of who, what, when, where, why, and how. So for many, many years now, I've traveled all over the world typically. I think I'm the only person who's been enjoying coronavirus because I haven't had to get on a plane. And so everybody in the world has this same concept of who, what, when, where, why, and how. So this is an easy way for people to understand how we create policy. So we can do this for any type of policy statement going anywhere, whether it's going to the cloud or on-premise, where we can define a who statement. Who should have access to the resource? So this is typically called the user ID. This is a layer 7 replacement of source IP address. So in this case, we're going to go to Salesforce. So we can say we're going to create a sales user ID or a sales who statement where we have the OUs of salespeople, sales admins, and sales managers. And we're going to authenticate them in a particular way. And then now we know who should have access to a resource. And what's cool about these kinds of constructs is that as people are provisioned or deprovisioned into your identity system, because this is tying into identity systems, we will automatically they will automatically be in the rule or out of the rule based upon the provisioning status. This one who statement is what a lot of the MFA vendors and those kind of people say zero trust is. They're just looking at one very small part based upon their world. And so we'll replace source IP address, but let's also replace port and protocol with a what statement. This is typically called an application ID or some other term, but this was all invented by Palo Alto Networks. So the what statement in this case is Salesforce. We're not doing port and protocol. This is Salesforce's app. That's all it could be. It can't be anything else. So now we're really restricting things. It doesn't matter that, it's not like opening the 80 and 443 where you can send any traffic around through that. Doesn't matter. Then we can do a when statement. Time limitations. We don't, but we should. You should have just-in-time rules that turn on when people need them and turn off when they don't. And then we can have a where statement. Where is that located? So in this case, we want the U.S. version of Salesforce. You'll probably not want the U.S. version. You'll want some European version of it. But it doesn't matter. This is the old destination IP address. Now we're moving it up in the stack so that we know in more details about it. And then we can have a why statement. This is typically, why is this doing this? We can have classification. We can have any kind of metadata related to compliance in here. And we could write policy based upon that. We don't, but we could. We should. It's one of the things that needs to happen more in the future. And then we have the how statement. So what are the criteria that we're going to apply to the packet to make sure that we should allow it? We typically in the Palo world call it content ID. So I'm going to use those terms because there's no generic term for it yet. So we will turn on IPS. We will turn on SSL decryption. We won't need URL filtering because even though this rule is going to allow traffic to traverse the public internet, it won't allow it to surf the public internet. We'll turn on some sandboxing and probably some DLP. So if all of these controls are met, then we will allow it. Zero trust is a set of granular allow rules. There are very few times that we ever have a deny rule. There's a default deny, so we'll deny a lot of traffic, but we don't care about that traffic. That's just stuff that we dropped in the bit bucket. We focus on allow rules in zero trust because all bad things happen in an allow rule. So if you're spending a lot of time asking why did we deny that, you're wasting a lot of time. You want to ask the other question, why are we allowing that? Because again, all bad things happen inside of an allow rule. So at onto it, we've built zero trust as a service where we can constantly look at things in a completely different way, where we're focusing not just on the technology, but we're focusing on the protection of our clients. And so that's why I came over here, because I'm inverting with my team and with my bosses the way we do managed services from a zero trust perspective. So we're looking at your protection, and zero trust as a service makes zero trust easy to consume. This is the next stage on my personal zero trust journey. 8.5 years at Forrester to define it, mature it, 4 years at Palo Alto Networks to prove that it could be built, and finally moving over here to Onto to show that it is easy to consume. So I want to leave you with just a couple of thoughts. The first one is called the Zero Trust Learning Curve, where we look at the sensitivity or criticality of various protect surfaces over all the time on the zero trust journey, and we can then figure out how we build these out over time. Remember, each protect surface contains a single DAS element. So early on, we're going to look at low sensitivity DAS environments and create protect surfaces that are called learning protect surfaces. This has low risk. So if you screw up, don't worry about it. Start over again. You need a safe place for people to learn how to do this. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do some practice protect surfaces. You get to zero trust the same way you get to Carnegie Hall. You practice, practice, practice. And luckily, this happens early on in the zero trust journey. And after that, you'll be able to focus on your high value assets, your crown jewels, your keys to the kingdom, whatever you call them in your environment. And once you've done that, and I used to say start there, but I don't say that anymore. I say start with things that are less sensitive so that you have some freedom to make some mistakes. And once you're done with that, then you can focus on things that are less important. And eventually you'll define a threshold, and you'll say anything below this line doesn't need to go into zero trust. And that's cool. There's a lot of things that don't need to be protected this much. There's stuff that you want people to use. So everything is not equal in terms of their protection needs, and you have to determine that as well. And then there's a maturity model that defines how you can measure this. So we're going to say a protect surface is called the cardholder data network, and the DAS element is PCI. And so you can say right now, we understand where that is. We haven't really mapped the transaction flows. Got a little bit of architecture, no policy, and we're not looking at any traffic. So that's 4, 5, 6, 7. Our score is 7. We want to get it higher, so we're going to do a project plan to move everything to 4s. And so this helps you determine how to define the project, how to get money. You can then show this to your bosses and show how you're doing. This is measurable. This is how you should measure zero trust, through this maturity model. So at this point, that's kind of the end of my talking points, and I guess I want to open it up for any questions, comments, thoughts, criticisms, anything that you want to say. Let's have a discussion. How does that sound?